code that transformed ordinary men into immortal legends was not about defeating external enemies. It was about destroying the only enemy that has ever existed, the version of you that still believes that self-control is war. In feudal Japan, samurai lived by Bushido, 7 principles that did not teach them what to do, but who to be. And when identity was clear, actions ceased to be choices. They became inevitable manifestations. Today, you will discover these 7 principles and how the Triaxial Method transforms them from an ancestral code into a modern neural structure, the fusion of mind, body, and spirit that dissolves self-control as a battle and reveals it as unshakable presence.
Kale woke up every day trying to control himself. He controlled his anger in traffic until he exploded at home. He controlled his social media addiction until he scrolled for hours at night. He controlled his impatience at work until he yelled at his son for a bad grade. He had been controlling himself for years, but inside it was constant chaos because he confused suppression with mastery. Until the day he read the Hagakure, the book hidden beneath the leaves. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, a samurai who spent the last years of his life in an isolated hut, dictated a disturbing code. The way of the samurai is found in death. When the choice is life or death, choose death without hesitation. Kale did not understand. How could choosing death teach self-control? But he kept reading, and he discovered that Bushido was not a combat manual. It was a code of death in life. 7 principles that killed the ego daily until only pure essence remained. And that essence, Kale would discover, was the only real self-control that exists.
The problem with modern man is not a lack of self-control. It is the belief that self-control means repressing impulses until you collapse or win. But that is not control. It is internal war, and wars do not generate peace. They generate exhaustion. The samurai understood something that modern culture has forgotten. You do not control impulses by resisting them. You dissolve them by dissolving the one who creates them. When there is no separate ego seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, seeking validation, impulses lose fuel. They die on their own. Bushido was not a list of external rules. It was the internal architecture of identity. The 7 principles did not tell the samurai what to do. They told him who to be. And when identity is clear, actions cease to be choices. They become inevitable manifestations. Shizuteru Ueda, a contemporary Zen philosopher, explains, true self-control is not repressing impulses. It is dissolving the self that generates them. Kale lived fragmented. He didn't know who he was. So every impulse was a negotiation. Every temptation was a war. Every day was the exhaustion of deciding between conflicting versions of himself. He needed a code that defined identity so clearly that decisions became automatic.
The samurai lived by 7 principles of Bushido. Each one operated simultaneously on 3 axes. Mind, who you decide to be. Body, how you act in the face of impulse. Spirit, what identity emerges after 1,000 repetitions. When the 3 axes align, self-control ceases to be an internal war. It becomes unshakable presence. The 7 principles, G, rectitude, integrity, the moral compass that kills hesitation. U, courage, identity greater than fear. Jin, benevolence, strength that protects, not dominates. Rei, respect, external form that protects internal essence. Makoto, honesty, sincerity, a word worth more than oaths. Meiyo, honor, legacy that survives when you disappear. Chugi, loyalty, anchor that prevents existential drift. Each principle is not a rule to follow. It is an identity to incorporate. And when incorporated through the Triaxial Method, they become spiritual DNA, not something you practice, but something you are.
Principle 1. G. Rectitude. Kale was in a meeting. His boss publicly humiliated a colleague. Everyone was silent. Kale was too. He left the room with corrosive shame. Why didn't I say anything? But it wasn't cowardice. It was something worse. Absence of an internal compass. He didn't know where right and wrong were within him, so he floated, waiting for external context to dictate behavior. G in Bushido is not justice as an external legal system. It is vertical alignment with what is right, regardless of the consequence. Tsunetomo wrote, "Rectitude is the bone that gives the body firmness. Without bone, the body collapses." Kale wrote 3 non-negotiable principles. I never lie, even when it costs me. I never humiliate, even when justified. I never abandon a word given, even when no one demands it. These were not moral rules. They were definitions of identity. And something strange happened. Impulses that were once difficult temptations to resist simply stopped making sense because they did not attack behavior, they attacked identity. And identity does not negotiate. Mini challenge. Every morning before any action, 3 minutes of internal recitation. Today I am a man of rectitude. My actions express this, they do not negotiate with it. On the 30th day, Kale faced an identical situation. Someone was humiliated, and this time, without hesitation, without calculating, he spoke. Not because he gathered courage, because the stake was planted, and stakes do not move. Principle 2. U. Courage. Kale had wanted to change careers for 3 years. He had a plan. He had savings. But every time a voice. It's not the right time. Wait 6 more months. He believed he was being cautious, but Tsunetomo would immediately identify it. Cowardice, masked as wisdom. Fear does not shout, "I am afraid." It whispers, "Be reasonable." In the Hagakure, Tsunetomo instructs, every dawn, visualize your own death. See your lifeless body. Feel the irrelevance of social fears. It is not morbidity. It is a radical recalibration of priority. When you truly internalize that you will die, the fear of being judged, of failing, of looking foolish, all of it reveals itself as the ego's illusion trying to keep you safe and small. Kale made a different calculation. He listed the cost of not acting. 3 more years in the job that was killing him inside. 1,000 more nights hating himself. Another decade looking back with regret. Then he compared it with the cost of acting. Possible failure, possible judgment, possible financial difficulty. He realized cowardice cost infinitely more because it stole not just years, but the soul. Mini challenge. 5 minutes daily. Sit down. Close your eyes. Visualize your funeral. Who is there? What do they say? What would you like them to say? Now return to the present and ask, am I living as the man who would deserve that praise? Kale did this for 40 days. On the 41st, he resigned, not because he became confident, because he realized that preserving ego was a luxury a mortal man cannot afford.
Principle 3. Jin, benevolence. Kale had self-control at work. He was respected, feared even. But at home, he exploded at his son over a bad grade, argued with his wife over details. He confused firmness with coldness, control with emotional distance. And the worst, the stronger he became externally, the emptier he felt internally. Because strength without Jin is not power, it is cruelty disguised as discipline. Jin is not about being nice, it is about recognizing humanity in the other without losing firmness. Tsunetomo, benevolence is a sheathed sword, always present, rarely drawn, but everyone knows it is there. True compassion is recognizing you too have been the failure, the coward, the lost one. When Kale stopped judging his son for the bad grade and remembered his own poor grades at 14, something dissolved. Jin kills moral superiority, and without superiority, judgment loses power. All that remains is presence that guides, not condemns. Mini challenge. Before reacting to another's mistake, pause 3 breaths. Ask, have I done this or an equivalent? If yes, speak from a position of equality, not authority. Kale applied it with a colleague who delayed a project. Instead of, you are irresponsible, he said, I have delayed projects when I was overwhelmed. What is weighing on you? The colleague opened up. The problem was solved. And Kale realized Jin does not weaken authority. It deepens it, because it comes from real strength, not a fragile ego. Principle 4. Rei, respect. Modern culture says, be authentic, express yourself without filters. Kale tried. He said everything he thought. He acted as he felt. The result? Destroyed relationships, a damaged reputation. Because authenticity without form is not freedom, it is chaos. Rei is not pretense. It is the deliberate architecture of behavior that protects the sacred within you. Tsunetomo, etiquette is invisible armor. It prevents small insults from penetrating your center. Samurai bowed with reverence, spoke with precision, acted with ceremony, not because they were robots, but because external form creates internal space. When behavior is chaotic, the mind becomes chaotic. When behavior is ceremonial, the mind calms down. Kale experimented. For 30 days, he acted with deliberate formality. He greeted everyone with a slight bow. He spoke slowly, with pauses. He dressed with intention. And something bizarre happened. He felt less angry. Not because he was controlling himself, but because form creates a feedback loop. Formal body communicates to the brain that the situation is under control. The brain relaxes. Impulses diminish. Many challenge. Choose 3 moments daily to act with ceremonial precision. Morning, make the bed with Zen attention. Afternoon, greet colleagues with total presence. Evening, prepare a meal as a ritual. Kale realized on the 40th day, he stopped yelling in traffic, not because his self-control improved, but because his brain was being trained 3 times a day to act with sacred restraint.
Principle 5. Makoto, honesty. Kale lied. Nothing major. He was late and said it was traffic. He forgot a task and said he didn't receive the message. 1,000 micro-lies, and each one was slow poison. Not because lying is morally wrong, but because every lie generates internal division. There is the real self and the performed self. And the more division, the less self-control, because you no longer know which you are controlling. Makoto literally means truth and sincerity, but in Bushido, it has a deeper layer. Word and being are one. When a samurai said something, it was not a promise, it was a manifestation of identity. Breaking his word was breaking himself. For 90 days, Kale applied a brutal protocol: speak only verifiable truth or admit ignorance. He could no longer say, I'll probably arrive at 6 p.m. Only, I don't know what time I'll arrive, but I will let you know when I do. The first few days were humiliating. It revealed how often he pretended certainty. But on the 60th day, something changed. People began to trust him more, even though he promised less, because his word finally carried real weight.
Mini challenge. Make only promises that do not depend on mood, motivation, or circumstance. Instead of, I will meditate every day, say, I will sit on the zafu every day at 6 a.m. For 100 days, Kale promised only 3 verifiable things. He fulfilled them all. Self-confidence did not come from a grand conquest. It came from a word that finally had gravity, because his word finally carried real weight. Principle 6. Mayo. Honor. Kale thought he sought honor, but what he was really seeking was approval. He posted achievements hoping for compliments. He told stories of effort hoping for recognition. And when it didn't come, he felt empty, because he was outsourcing his self-worth. True honor does not depend on an audience. Honor is who you are when no one is looking. Mayo is not fame. It is the trail of integrity you leave behind. Sunetomo, honor is measured not by what they say about you today, but by what they will remember when you are gone. Real honor cannot be built for an audience. It has to be built for you, and if an audience recognizes it, that is a bonus. Kale stopped posting his morning routine, stopped talking about meditation, stopped seeking validation. And strangely, for the first time, he felt real pride. Not the noisy pride that asks for recognition, the silent pride that knows, deeply, I am living with integrity. Mini challenge. Every night, before sleeping, 3 questions. Did I act today as a man I respect? Did I do something that, if publicly revealed, would shame me? If today were my last day, would I be at peace with who I was? On the 100th day, Kale no longer needed to ask consciously. The internal tribunal became an automatic filter. Before acting, the body asked, does this pass the tribunal? If not, the impulse died on its own.
Principle 7. Chuji. Loyalty. Kale had total freedom. No rigid boss, no forced commitments, no oppressive obligations. But he felt lost. He drifted. Because freedom without loyalty is not liberation, it is drift. There was nothing greater than him to serve, so he served only the ego. And the ego is a cruel master, never satisfied, always demanding more, never recognizing enough. Chuji is not blind obedience. It is choosing something greater than yourself and devoting yourself completely. Kale decided family, creative purpose, and the Bushido code itself. 3 things greater than the ego. When loyalty was clear, decisions became simple. Not what do I want, but what does my loyalty demand? Self-control ceased to be effort. It became navigation by a fixed compass. Modern culture sells that commitment limits, but Kale discovered the opposite. The absence of loyalty left him paralyzed with infinite options. Loyalty reduced options, and paradoxically, liberated him. Mini challenge. Write down 3 non-negotiable loyalties and memorize them. Every morning, before any action, recite internally. Today, I serve family with presence, purpose with dedication, code with honor. Kale received an offer for a lucrative project that would require neglecting his family. Before, he would have considered it. Now, he refused in 3 seconds, without guilt, because loyalty had already decided. Day 287. Kale was following all the principles. Gi, Yu, Jin, Rei, Makoto, Mayo, Chugi, all integrated. But something still hurt. An internal voice whispered, "Why are you doing all this? To be admired as a disciplined man? To feel superior?" And he realized the final ego is not the one that breaks principles. It is the one that uses principles to inflate itself. Worst trap, practicing Bushido to feed the pride of being a Bushido practitioner. He was so focused on applying the 7 principles that he didn't realize he had created a new ego, the samurai ego. And this ego was just as destructive as the old one, only more subtle, more dangerous, because it wore the clothes of virtue. Kale almost quit. He thought, if even this becomes an ego trap, then there is no way out. But then he remembered. Tsunetomo wrote that the way of the samurai is found in death, not physical death, death of the observing self. There was an unwritten 8th principle, Mushin, mind without mind, the final dissolution of the one who practices.
On day 301, Kale stopped monitoring how is my Bushido doing today, and simply lived. And something transcendent happened. There was no longer Kale practicing rectitude, there was just rectitude happening. There was no longer Kale being courageous, there was just courage manifesting. Shizuteru Ueda calls this Muga Mushin, no ego, no mind. It is not nihilistic emptiness, it is fullness without a separate center. When Kale observed deeply, he realized, who is controlling whom? If there is a self controlling impulses, where does that self come from? And if impulses arise on their own, perhaps right actions also arise on their own when the ego stops interfering. It is not fatalism, it is recognition. When identity is perfectly aligned via Bushido, correct actions emerge naturally, effortlessly, without a doer. Kale became a mirror. Situations arose, responded with appropriate Bushido, and then disappeared without leaving an emotional trace, not because he became insensitive, but because there was no longer a Kale clinging to the result of the action. Just correct action, then silence. This is transcendent self-control. It is not controlling impulses, it is being a void so pure that impulses pass through without sticking.
Bushido was not created to make samurai happy. It was created to make them ready to die with honor at any moment. To Tsunetomo, I discovered that the way of the samurai is death. In a situation of life or death, choose death quickly. Kale always read this as a metaphor, but it wasn't. It was literal, and also metaphorical. Literal, the samurai needed to be ready for physical death without hesitation. Metaphorical, he needed to die to the ego daily. Kale no longer sought to be happy. He sought to live in a way that, in his last breath, he could look back without regret of character. The 7 principles were not separate rules. It was always one code. Be integral in mind, body, and spirit, regardless of circumstance. When you decide who you are and honor that decision until death, self-control ceases to be a battle. It becomes the natural manifestation of aligned identity. The true samurai is not the one who wins 1,000 battles. It is the one who lives so aligned that battles cease to arise. Like this video, not for the algorithm, but as a promise to choose one principle today, just one. Ji, Yu, Jin, Rei, Mikoto, Mayo, or Chugi. Live it for 100 days. Comment which one you chose, because when you declare publicly, the brain registers it as a deeper commitment. And subscribe because every video here is a layer of the same code that Tsunetomo left. the voluntary death of the false self, so that the true one can finally emerge. Bushido does not give you a better life. It gives you a dignified death. And a dignified death is the only thing that matters.